Well, so we've been talking with Kelly Whitaker, and I am Peter Reinhardt. Welcome to Pizza Talk, presented by Pizza Quest. And we've been talking to a lot of great luminaries in both the pizza world, the artisan world, and today we're talking with a guy who's familiar to many of you who have been following the Pizza Quest story, because we have a lot of webisodes with Kelly Whitaker, and he's really both a chef, a pizza guy, and an artisan on many levels. So we're really going to hit a lot of bases today. So first of all, welcome back, Kelly. It's been a long time since we've had you on screen, but it's good to catch up a little bit.
No, I'm super thrilled to be here, man. The first second you called, I was like, I'm in, because we just had such a good time filming Pizza Quest and on that journey, really all across the country at least, and you know, so it's nice to be back in a different format with you now.
Well, let me for those who haven't seen the webisodes, and if you haven't, go to Pizza Quest, go to the webisode section, and find the Kelly Whitaker segments. We have like a whole story arc that included a lot of time at the restaurant, but also we had a great adventure where Kelly came out to California, and we went together to where was it?
The brewery.
The brewery, yeah.
And the brewery with Patrick Rue. Yep, amazing time.
Kelly and I challenged Patrick and his beer makers to create an original beer inspired by an original pizza that Kelly created, that we worked together on, but really most of the toppings and all the concept was Kelly's and his team. And we gave them the pizzas. We gave them two choices. They picked one. And 3 months later, we all met back in Denver at the Great American Beer Festival, where they brought the keg. Kelly rolled up with a wood-fired oven. We made the same pizza again. They cracked the keg, and we had them for the first time at the same time. And we got all that on film, so you guys have got to catch up and see that. And that's really kind of where we left you. I've seen Kelly since then, but we haven't filmed with you since then. So a lot has happened. That was a couple of years ago. And but one of the things that sparked this conversation was that just this week, I got notification that Kelly was nominated. He's a finalist now for the James Beard Award, which will be bestowed in about a week or two. And I know you were, for a long time, I saw your name on the short list and, you know, and on the semifinals. And there you were on the final list, Chef of the Year in the Mountain Region. So congratulations. We predicted it a couple of years ago, and it's really happening for you. So between that and everything that happened in between, give us a little sense of your journey.
Sure. You know, what a memory thinking about the early days of Boston, some of those videos. And the other day I was kind of like thinking about it and looked some of them up myself. And I was like, you know, one of the episodes we were talking about my discovery of 00 flour. And I thought that was really cool because since the time of, you know, those videos, probably like 3 years ago, we started a 501c3 nonprofit called Noble Grain Alliance, dedicated to kind of working on both the sort of growing side of things and then the kind of helping create demand around some of these heirloom type varietal grains being grown here in Colorado. And so, you know, from even that, even though I look completely different in those videos, I was still talking and touching on some of the same work that we're doing today, just in a different format. So yeah, we started the nonprofit. I still continue to travel a lot and learn from a lot of great chefs. Ended up going to Hong Kong for a week and working with a yakitori team, awesome team called Yardbird. And that got me really confused about what we were going to do next, because I just got so inspired from these different groups. Went and spent some time in Northern California with the Single Thread with Kyle and Chef Kyle and his team up there, was just so inspiring. So, you know, a lot of these.
Single Thread, Kelly? What is that?
Single Thread is it's a 3 Michelin star restaurant. It's only been open a couple of years, supported by a farm system. It's a California restaurant, but much deeper into fish, seafood. And I mean, you could just imagine, I went out with their foraging team, just an exciting team of people, some of the best in the world, I think, right now, when it comes to in Healdsburg, up in Healdsburg.
Oh my
yeah, really amazing. Yeah, and actually they're, you know, last week and the last few weeks I saw their teams pivoting to go format as a 3 Michelin. I just think that's, you know, watching these guys do that stuff at a time like this has just been incredible. So, you know, after Noble Grain and really looking about, you know, what do I want to do in terms of like, would I ever have restaurant again. And sorry, I'm in the restaurant. I'm actually at the Wolf's Tailor right now.
Which is
You know,
something that
but
didn't exist the last time we filmed. So you'll catch
yeah.
how you got to what
So
Taylor is, but
yeah, so I think you remember I talked a lot about Naples, Italy being some of my first jobs. And like I said, with these sort of traveling around and then moving to Los Angeles to be a line cook before up in Basta. Basta was that original core, like simple wood fire pizza. I was in a challenging location. So I just thought, no one was ever going to go there. So, I did whatever I could. We made the videos. I did everything I could to try to draw people there. And just thinking about it, like I said, if I'd ever have another restaurant, and Basta centered around 1 foot wood fire oven. So I thought about pasta and noodles, which is a lot of the basis of my cooking. And so, I right next to Campania in Italy, there's Apulia, which is the heel of the boot. I would travel over there, and Italian spiedini had been in my head for so long, and I was like, that's why I kept going to places like Tokyo and learning about kushiyaki and yakitori. And I really wanted to push this new category of Italian spiedini. But again, through my influences in travel, I just decided, we're going to do something that's just in my head. It's a new American restaurant. It's going to be forward thinking in terms of grains. So we mill a lot of flour that goes into our noodles. But it was hard to describe in the beginning to people. They said, "What are you opening?" And I said, well, I'm kind of opening our story in a way, 20 years of traveling through Asia. My sister lived there for a long time. So I'd go to all the markets and I would try to work as many places as I could. And these are no name restaurants. Just like when I worked in Italy, I always track back my path. And I'm some of these chefs that have just worked for so many great chefs, and I did too. I worked for some great chefs in Los Angeles, but a lot of places I always went were sort of the mom and pop corner shops that I was like, can I come over here and make some dumplings with you? Or, and I was always embarrassed because, over there, they make it look so easy. And, so I kind of brought all those travels and everything, that I learned from Basta into what is the Wolf's Tailor. And, we've been open for a couple of years now. People didn't get it at first, but I think once they came in and experienced the restaurant, they were like, oh, okay, it's delicious and it's good and it makes sense,
What is Wolf's Tail? What's the name referred to?
Yeah, so Wolf's Tailor is a story of, the sheep in wolf's clothing. So we looked at one of the things we love to honor the most is the maker. We feel like without, just our restaurant teams and without our fishermen, our fisherwomen, farmers, and, that whole system that supports that sort of category of the maker is what supports this idea of like, the wolf being able to eat the sheep. So if you're the sheep and wolf, if the wolf in sheep's clothing, if the wolf didn't have a perfect suit, then he wouldn't eat. The sheep would be spooked off. They would know it's the wolf coming. And so, no one ever talks about the tailor of who makes that suit for the wolf. And the wolf could be anything. It could be a giant, Denver as we know it, the landscape's totally changed. It's buildings are going up. There was cranes going up everywhere. It's just a very fast-paced moving thing. And you get in these restaurant deals and they're like developer deals, or you do these, it's hard to find the corner restaurant again, so much of it is about the bigger developer deal. And so there was just this like, who's moving this city forward? It's really the makers that are crafting the city that I think really define what the city looks like in the future,
And you've always been pretty much a locavore, a farm to table guy, a back to nature kind of guy. So Wolf's Tailor sounds like it's sort of again part of the evolution of you as a chef and as a human being, but also your culinary evolution. So are there Asian influences on the menu, or is it?
Yeah, definitely. But yeah, so I'll give one example that maybe can kind of provide some context. We use Japanese donabe pots. They're clay pots. They're made in Iga province of Japan. I actually went there with some staff. I love this type of like cookware. And so this is so donabe pots, they could be, it's like a one pot meal almost, where you might cook and set something down with the family and eat at once. Well, I thought it was like, immediately I was like, well, looking at what they're cooking and everything, I kind of reflected on my first job in Naples and learning the dish aqua pazza, which is like crazy water. So I was like, so it's definitely, so one of our first dishes were donabe aqua pazza. And, you know, again, I think that represents like the first place I cooked. It's a respect to the technique of what is happening maybe in another culture. And without saying like, when I think, and everybody said, oh, you're Italian Japanese fusion, I said, no, I think fusion food for me is like, you know, almost like a Korean taco. When you say it out loud, right? It's like,
Yeah.
Korean taco is a fusion idea, right? Maybe it's born of something, and there can be some authenticity to someone else's story behind it. But with mine, I was like, you know, I want to be, every dish that we do needs to be rooted in an idea. So we're highly focused on zero waste. So a lot of dishes we do, instead of saying we're going to make chawamushi, which is like a Japanese custard, we started using it was corn season when we opened. So we started using the cobs and started making the dashi, which is a seaweed stock from the cobs. And then we had the stock and we said, now what do we create with it? And that's sort of how that dish was born. It wasn't born from like us saying, let's go make this. It was like, we have this ingredient, we have this sort of waste product that turns in this beautiful stock. Where can we put this stock? And chawamushi became the vegetable for that. So, or I'm sorry, not the vegetable, but the vessel for that dish. So we do that a lot with grains and flour, and just kind of like, what do we do with leftover bran? Well, in Japan, they ferment vegetables in rice bran. So I was like, can we do that with heirloom grain? So when we sift off some of the flour to make pasta noodles for our pasta program, we take the bran and we'll activate it with like some kombucha or something and do, it's called nuka zuke. But again, another idea just simply born out of, let's not waste anything. Let's be intentional with everything that we do in the kitchen. And you mentioned, you know, being sort of a locavore or whatever. That's absolutely true. We embarked this last year. We've been working on the grain, sort of the grain chain or the regional grain economy for quite some time now. But the San Luis Valley is located about 3 hours south of our restaurant. We teamed up with Sarah Michael Jones, Amazing Farmers, and we're growing on about 160 acres now of 5 varieties of heirloom grains, which is now in the middle of everything that we're doing right now, which is a crazy time for everybody, you know, but we just opened the doors of our grain mill to supply other people with flour and grains last week. So that's been, you know, something that was born again out of like, we've got to release the movement that sort of is around the grains that's being held up. So we started a small grain elevator up in Boulder that supplies our bakery and the Wolf's Tailor, and yeah, lots going on.
That's
you know?
a lot. That definitely none of that existed the last time we were together, and that was just a couple of years ago. But a lot has happened. Just the fact that you are milling your own, you're planting your own wheat seeds. If I say 5 different varieties of wheat or grain, and milling it and making that available not just for your own use but for others is a huge big step, and it's kind of expanded your reach. I guess is the best word for what it is you're trying to do. You must be networked then with a whole lot of other kindred spirits in your area that are doing this. This is not a one-man show.
Not at all. We are, it's funny because like in Maine, and you can look at some great mills, even out where on your side of things on the East Coast. Glenn Roberts, you know, is the godfather of grain, right? And we've all been sort of inspired by what's happening in the United States right now around this. But regionally, it's kind of been held up. You know, Colorado has an incredible, you know, brewing scene, distillery scene. And, you know, so we have some really good malt houses, you know, but on the heirloom grain side, there's a few that have turned into many now. You've got, you know, Andy Clark up at Moxie Bread, who's just done a phenomenal job pushing the heirloom grain forward, you know, thinker as a baker. And there's Nana Meyer at the university, who's been doing grain trials for the past 3-4 years on what grows here, what does well here. And then you've got a lot of farmers locally that are motivated to grow, you know, Boulder and the whole surrounding area. A lot of that pre-1950s was just pure wheat fields. You know, a lot of these communities were found on wheat. So we know it does really well here. But no, there's a great connective grain chain here. And you're seeing, you know, our mill pop up but I have a feeling you're going to see 3, 4 more pop up. And it's just like, right now, I think the demand is there. I think that we can all sort of support each other on the way up. So that's what we've been focused on with Noble Grain and with our own business, to kind of get everybody, connected and really, like I said, get this grain like into the food system where you can drink it, you can eat it, you can, you can ferment vegetables with it, you can do all these things with it. But that's really it's almost like it needed to happen. I never kind of woke up and said, I need to start a grain mill or be a miller or a flour, but
Most people don't.
I think when we're driven by a lot of, we've always been driven by the idea that if we can provide an answer to something, it's not just a restaurant, it's not just a business, but if we can provide an answer for a bigger problem or something that, we feel like we can contribute for a lot of the stuff around grain simply in Colorado is because we want to support the land regenerative agricultural process. We want to support rural farmers. They need a new crop. They need a new thing that, and we have water issues. We have all these things. So there's like a whole list of things. And then it's like, oh yeah. And we like to mill grain for pizza, it's like, that's like the 10th thing on the list of things that this could solve for our communities. And so we know how to put it into a pizza, and we know how to put it into a noodle, and we know how to put it into a beer. And so it's this I think Colorado is slated to be, I think, what could be an example, even though we're a little late to what's happening in Washington. And like I said, your area, North Carolinas, and there's just so many great mills out there, but we're a little late to the party as a community, but I think we're going to catch up really fast.
Well, you're right. I think that regionally speaking, I'm seeing many regions identifying, just like you did, a need and a network of people that can each be a piece of that sort of. I guess the best word to say it is find a need and fill it, and it's easier to fill it together. So people are growing, they're milling, and identifying regionally with whatever it is that works in that local area. The Colorado team, the mountain area where you are in Denver and around, has so many resources, and it's wonderful to see that it's all coming together. I know you've been talking about it for a long time, and now it seems like it's gelling. The dots are getting connected, which is really
it is. And I mean, what a time to talk about flour and empty shelves of bad flour that you see in the grocery stores, or not as enriched, not as nutrient dense as what we're growing, being sold out everywhere in the middle of this COVID experience right now. And, that has, I think it would have probably taken us maybe 5 years or more to get society thinking about flour in grains like they have in the last 2 months. Like now, like it's a complete shift in the thinking. And yes, a lot of flour is selling right now. We'll see how that goes. But more than anything, I think people's mind just opened up to it everywhere you look. You look at stories on King Arthur, you look at stories with even Central Milling, our friends Nikki and Keith, the great Central Milling guys. So you're watching what is happening across the country right now and across the world with this movement. And if someone wanted to go out and do something right now and be like, flour's in high demand, I'm going to go do this, I'd have to be like, you kind of had to start 5 years ago. We harvested 80,000 pounds this year, and we have another 500,000 on the way with, again, just an incredible system of farmers, growers. We don't have our cleaning set up. Mountain Mom Milling, Chris Gozar is in Southern Colorado. He just raised his hand. He's like, I know this isn't my grain, but I'll clean it for you. And I was like, thanks, Chris. I mean, what an amazing outpouring of community to try to get this stuff out and into the community. It's just been awesome.
Exactly. And community really is the key word. And in fact, I think we could talk more and more about this, and I do want to explore this further with you, but I also want to get into finding out like where we left you at Boston, because Boston itself, we've had some memorable meals. We captured some of it on video on Pizza Quest, and I want to find out what's happening there and how you're splitting your time between the two operations and all the other projects that you're working on. But I think what we'll do is we'll take a break here. We're with Kelly Whitaker, who is up for a James Beard Award, we should know, in a week or two, and hopefully we'll have you back on right after those awards are announced. And I know that for anybody who follows the James Beard world, which is really the Oscars of the culinary community, just getting nominated is so huge and such an honor that everybody who gets nominated really is a winner. And then, of course, there's always one who's chosen from each category to sort of come up and get the medal. So we'll find out how that works out in a couple of weeks. But when we come back, let's catch up a little bit on some of the menu items at Basta and some of the ways that you've applied this new connectedness that you've established in the area as you've developed that restaurant, and also Wolf's Tailor, which is the restaurant that you've really been nominated for this James Beard Award.
Mm-hmm.
So we'll see you at the next episode of Pizza Talk, presented by Pizza Quest with Kelly Whitaker. I'm Peter Reinhardt. We'll see you next time. I'm Peter Reinhardt. We're on Pizza Talk, presented by Pizza Quest, and we're with our friend Kelly Whitaker, James Beard chef nominee from Denver and Boulder, Colorado. We've been talking about sort of the journey from where we left Kelly a few years ago when he was focused on Basta. We called it Pizzeria Basta at the time. It's Basta in Boulder. We got some great footage, some great webisodes, which hopefully many of you have seen. And if you haven't, please go to the webisode section of Pizza Quest and check out those videos. I still have this great memory of you doing a sous vide short ribs over a bed of polenta in your wood-fired oven. That was just it was the meal that dreams are made of, and I think about it all the time. And I think we captured some of that on tape, so there'll be a webisode for that. And we've done a lot of other fun adventures with Kelly. And so we've been talking about his new place, the Wolf's Tailor, and this is the restaurant that has brought Kelly his James Beard nomination. But I want to go back to Basta because Wolf's Tailor is moving into a lot of new territory. What are you doing at Basta? Is it still sort of focused on pizzas and wood-fired foods, or what?
Absolutely. So yeah, as you know, that restaurant since the beginning of time has been centered around one wood fire oven. Everything comes out of it or touches it some way. It's led to a lot of innovation around things like sous vide cooking, like what can you do at 1,000 degrees and work with low and high temperatures. Not given that we have stoves, or we can do traditional braises and things like that in an oven. So we hit 10 years this year at New Year's. So it's a decade. I felt like maybe a lot of people, we have great regulars, but a lot of people probably missed like the first 6 years. They still can't believe it that we're a 10-year decade restaurant.
Goes fast, doesn't it?
It does. And, it's emotional. I've had a lot of thoughts about what to do, but and how we treat it. As you know, we had a mill in the back. We started milling the polenta that you're talking about. We mill all the corn, we mill all the flour. Kept kind of innovating around that. And there's a spot next to Basta this past year that was empty forever, and I just wanted to get the mill out of the restaurant. So we opened a bakery too in between called Dry Storage. It's it's definitely a micro bakehouse. We bake about 10 or 15 loaves a day. My friends that are in the baking world they're jealous because baking, as you know, almost has to be done on a large level to make sense sometimes. And, I just say we're a community bakery. We've learned a lot about bread in the past year or so, but particularly it's helped also Basta lean into better ideas and more accuracy around the flour we use in our pizza. Part of taking that space was to control our dough process more. So since the beginning of time, we were always, doing, no cold ferment. It was always sort of day of, heavy on the mother dough. And now we're moving into the realm of the sourdoughs and, using the levain and using new techniques around what we're doing there with pizza. And so, yeah, we're still doing about 10 plates out of the wood fire oven and about 5 or 6 pizzas. I've loosened up around sort of some of the, like what kind of ingredients I feel like should be used in the restaurant or not versus, what we use at Wolf's to say pull in, umami flavors, which a lot of chefs talk about, but how do you bring umami? And, Parmesan itself has a lot of umami in it. Right. And it's, so we look for that sort of wow factor out of food, of like what gets our guests really excited and salivating around our food. And so we brought some of that into it. But I would just say, yeah, we're still simple and on a delusion. There we go. Sorry. We're still keeping things pretty simple. Basta is still means enough. The pizzeria may have changed a little bit, but the name still carries a lot of weight. We try not to overdo it too much and just cook pretty simple food there.
You were making the pizzas on flour when I was last there that was sourced from some of the mills that are doing great work. Are you using any of your own home milled flour in your pizza dough now?
Oh yeah, and now we've taken that next step to take our mills out of the bakery. We'll be producing, in the next month. This is year 10. That we're still changing our recipe every day. We haven't stopped changing things, so we'll be on our own all grown Colorado wheat flour over the next like about 30-45 days. You're catching us in the middle of an R&D process that puts our flour completely. So we're blending right now, our house milled with some of central milling, and we'll be going more towards the direction of 100%. Not that I don't love central milling, some great friends, but definitely want to keep our regional grains going right now.
Yeah. Well, we recently had a conversation with Dan Richer of Rasa Pizza in New Jersey, one of the great pizzerias now emerging, globally. And he said something very similar to what you did. It's really for him a never-ending learning process, and part of what gives him joy and fulfillment in the work is that it's not a set thing that he's kind of dialed it in and now he can knock it out for the next 20 years. For him, it's more about the learning than it is even about the cooking.
Yeah, especially with some of these grains, a lot of chefs that are very committed to the local food systems prefer to work with flour that is, that has been rested, so to speak. Nikki and Keith, they fresh mill their flours, but if it sits in a bag or whatever, so you start. It's not even just that. It's not just double O versus something versus a general purpose or malted flour that we played around with. But really, it's like if I get Rouge de Bordeaux grown in Colorado, or maybe I'm getting some great flour from Karen Springs in Washington, and you start introducing that into your bread program, as it changes everything. You're forced, just like a different tomato, to make it different, to honor or bring out some dish that is using that tomato. We've always cooked seasonally, but flour kind of missed that, right? Or it just hasn't been, chefs don't have maybe the time to think about, oh my God, I have to re-gram out my entire recipe right now because I just got all these heirloom grains, that are alive and they're moving all over the place and they have different protein levels every year and you're constantly testing. So I think it's a burden. That's why when I think about owning, our mill right now and what we want to put into the food system, I don't want, my chef friends to necessarily overthink that process. We've been spending so long thinking about how these work and how they act that, I'm just sending a bag of my flour to a local pizzeria that just says pizza on it, on a brown bag, and I want to take that guesswork out and say, you might have to increase hydration around that. But what we want to do is sort of take out some of the guesswork around these heirloom grains so we can see them get into the system a little more.
Well, we've seen the artisan bread movement, and there's a lot of great bakers out there that are now kind of also embracing this challenge. And the challenge is basically to work with local grains that aren't going to perform the same year after year after year, but are going to have, be dependent on the growing system, on the weather, on the, it's not, this year's flour is not going to be the same as next year's flour. And it used to be the thing that we avoided as bakers. Now it's the thing we embrace. So I think the baking movement's work that you mentioned in our last interview, our friend Andy Clark at Moxie Bakery, it sounds like he's kind of embraced that challenge. We have bakers here in Carolina that do the same thing, that they're looking now to take their own baking game to another level by saying, I don't want to just go on automatic pilot. I want to keep learning and adjusting and letting the dough teach me what it needs so that I can keep putting out better and better bread. And
Yeah.
it seems like that's
Our
what's
our
going on.
bakeries, yeah, our bakeries, Andy and I, we're probably 10 miles apart. He's in the town over from Boulder, and our styles couldn't be more different. He really celebrates like turkey red is a great grain. It's got beautiful earth to it. You know, it's a little more I don't want to call weedy or whatever. And we're really focused on like Sonoran, a really white flower, or Yacora Rojo. And now we're, you know, in the fall we both lean more towards the dark and then go to the light. It really gives a defining, you know, what's the guy down the street baking and making versus this. And with pizza, so we have 4 projects now. I mentioned 3 of them now, dry storage, but Bruto is a little outlet that we opened in downtown Denver. It's the most recent one. And we could talk about how we've all been managing this, you know, and
Yeah.
thinking about this coming from a
Maybe
guy
4
who
places at
has
once.
has one restaurant for 10 years and have been really happy with that, and why we're growing and why we feel like it's necessary. But I just changed. So we do a few pizzas there. They're based on madre, like the mother dough. Bruto is a Spanish word, but I kind of wanted to think
Can you
about,
spell that? It's called Bruto?
yeah, Bruto. And it just kind of means crude. It's kind of like pasta. It just means very simple. But we have a Stefano Ferrara Italian oven there. I've never used a Stefano Ferrara. I always use like earth stones for wood fire cookery. And there's an oven for a time and a place. I'll just say that. But we have this Italian oven there that, you know, we didn't start with this. We were using a lot of grains from, you know, Mexico and South America, and corn and rice, and milling all these things and kind of looking at this new style of food. But during this pandemic, I really wanted to go and do a pizza there that, again, is very approachable. And I was thinking, you know, just about what we were talking about just now about grains. And we grow Sonoran. Sonoran is a Sonoran white is a grain that made its way up through the South. But it became the main staple flour for flour tortillas in Mexico. And it's kind of been lost, and they're reviving that movement too. So I harvested about 40,000 pounds of Sonoran, and I'm thinking, well, how do I get more whole grain in? As you know, with wood fire, if you cook at 1,000 degrees, the bran and everything can start to burn very quickly, right? So I was like, why don't we, so in the middle of all this, in the last 2 weeks, we decided to innovate around the grains, and we're doing almost a New Haven style pizza with a rolling pin. We turned the oven down 300-400 degrees, and we're doing this sort of thin, crispy, and it feel like a flour tortilla pizza. It's definitely it's not New Haven, and it's not the thin crust you see out of Rome.
It's almost like
it's
call a bar pizza.
Yeah, and but it totally like allows me to put 100% Sonoran into a dough, and you gotta try it, man. I don't know how to box one up and ship it to you, but I'm gonna cryo freeze one, and I'm gonna send one to you so you can try this. Like, because I haven't had a pizza like it. I love what Scars is doing. I love what all these other guys when I see them doing, how do you reinvent pizza? Pizza's been done, you know. And as I started thinking about, like, you know, a recent travel to Mexico City before this started, and meeting people there and talking about their stories around grain and all of that, it just kind of led us to this new style of pizza, which I think is just super cool.
Well, I think that you know, athletes often talk about as they get really to their peak, they start to feel that the game has come to them instead of them having to go after the game, you know, to score their points. And so they wait for the game to come in, and then they know how to respond to it. And in this case, what I'm hearing is, you know, you're responding to what the grain is telling you that it can do and what it's best for. And you're beginning to sense that I can't force this flour into that mold. I've got to find the best way to showcase it. And you're finding a new way to do that, which is you're letting the game come to you.
Mm-hmm.
It makes any sense.
No, it makes perfect sense. And I think that's where our head's been at for a long time. But as I'm looking back and reflecting at Basta and all this stuff, I'm like, oh yeah, we really are driven by like ideas on how we want to pay our employees and how to celebrate the farmer and how to, you know, and, you know, recently during the pandemic, you asked about other changes at Basta. I typically don't put all the farms we use on the menu. We teach our team to talk about that. I wanted it to be a personal connection. So on our menu for 10 years, we've never listed all the farmers. I had a shout out to La Quercia for prosciutto at one point. I had, Rob DiNapoli and Chris Bianco's, tomato sauce partnership, because that was so new. I wanted to put it out there, but really when it came to local farms, that was the job of our servers. And with this whole thing, cutting out that connection, just this past week, if you look at our menu, I have a whole section where I name a pizza after a farm. And this is after 12 years, and I list all the farms on basically everything. It's overrun with names of farms. And so I've gone from completely zero mentioning it to overrun this sort of language around it. But it's a lot of this stuff, like I said, it's been there the whole time.
Yeah.
We've thought about these grains since episode 1 with you, where I'm talking about 00 can come from the United States, which was that aha moment I had.
That was a new idea. Yeah.
Yeah. And now to this point where, we're doing all this stuff. So yeah, a lot of constant innovation, but the ingredient, you have to listen. I think most of all, I talk way too much. But I have to, people think, like how, and I'm like, well, I listen a lot. Like I listen to, the stock that comes out of nothing that now turns into this beautiful dish. You have to be defined. I think what is new is being led by what's coming in the back door more than ever, instead of like trying to pre-design a dish or pizza or whatever. Just let it come in and listen more.
Well, listening is an art form in itself, but you got a lot of balls up in the air now. You've got 3 or 4 restaurants. You got a bakery now. You're growing wheat. How do you manage your time, and how much time are you spending at each location, and how much are you turning over to the people you've been mentoring and training to be able to carry it when you're not present?
Yeah, it's been an incredible process and learning curve for me. And I have a family on top of that, 2 beautiful kids. So this.
How old are your kids, Kelly?
So 10 and 5. So one takes care of the other.
5-year-old was not around the last time I saw you.
Yeah, they're amazing, and we're a group that talks about work-life balance constantly. For our employees, we're obviously in Colorado, so that sort of lifestyle I think fits for low turnover. When you talk about like, hey dude, we really want you to go snowboarding we really want you to take the time to go for a hike. Like those things are super important, and now more than ever. So I've always struggled with the idea that we should have more than 1 or 2 things going on, because we want to do them so well. And so I always, especially at opening Boston, I was like, it was almost one of those places, if I was gone, it had to be closed. It could not exist if I was not in the room. And, so we have an incredible team of people, some of which are still very much on board since you've been in the restaurants. My original chef at Basta is rejoined us from Los Angeles here. So yeah, part of it's the delegation piece, but a lot of it has to do more with what type of restaurant we are. So we are a restaurant that has not, none of our restaurants were a part of doing happy hours. I love good happy hour, so no disrespect to the happy hours out there and all this stuff. But if you're constantly grinding in a location where you need to support lunch, brunch, happy hour, dinner, and so when people say, oh, you're in the restaurant business, this must be so taxing. I'm like, I'm in the restaurant business, but if you add up our 4 projects in our mill, like just our 4 projects alone, I have a staff of about 40 people now, less obviously, without having full dining rooms right now. But I think the most important thing that we go back to is like, if you want to be able to control, you have to have that set, maybe the restaurant's not open 7 days a week. We really focus on 5 hours of service. And then we really put into our team everything. We really pour into them. It's not just delegation, but it's teaching. If they're not learning it in Boston, we're going to send them to, our miller has gone to work with Grayson at Bellegarde in New Orleans. We lean on a lot of mentors out there, both in the milling world and the chef world, to be like, this is something where they need a break. They need to go learn. So we're constantly trying to educate and empower our employees to be there. So it's, we've been lucky because our kitchens are 4 people. Our front of house are 5 people. We're open for 5 hours. So it's a weird algorithm that, it kind of works in the end to say that And believe me, we fail at this all the time. We do get caught up. We're not, this isn't some, we're floating in a euphoria of work-life balance, and, you know, but we're learning about it, is all I can say. We're learning how to be better at it. We're learning how to put the walls on to make sure that our management teams and leadership teams are not overworking themselves. So
Yeah.
you have to work at it to stop it, the work.
And that's
It's a
why,
lot of work to stop the work, you know?
yeah, but it's why it's a never-ending quest, because we never really,
Yeah.
get to the end of that quest. It's a journey, and part of that journey is a discovery process, and failure is a part of that discovery process as well. And I think that everyone who's been successful, could probably list on the other side that people don't see, all the times that they felt that they weren't hitting the mark, but it led them to, to finally kind of put their formula together, their thing together, and then you start again. We're seeing
Yeah.
this theme emerge a lot in all the conversations we're having with some of the other great artisans that we've had here on Pizza Talk, is this idea that, it's not just about what you're able to do, but it's also what you're able to pass on to your staff, to the people in your realm of influence. Yeah, yeah, and many of the folks that we know are now moving more into a mentor role than they are into just being sort of the talented cook role. And it sounds
Yeah.
like in the 10 years that we've known you, you've kind of moved more and more into that role of helping others find their way in this journey.
Yeah.
And that's wonderful to hear.
Yeah, I think it's like we said, if I'm bogged down, how am I going to have impact? How am I going to help with Noble Grain Alliance? How am I going to help? I work with Slow Food. I work with Monterey Bay on their seafood watch programs. I let, if I don't make space for that, again, how are we going to move things forward, right? So if the restaurants are incredibly important, what we do to serve the guests is incredibly important. You're right about, it's a process, it's a journey, but and we got to enjoy it. We're still cooking food that we love every day. I
Yeah,
still, my favorite shift to get stuck on is pizza shift still, no matter what. Like, I think it's every chef, when you're on the, when you're cooking all these plates and plating up all these detailed food, and, and then all of a sudden I show up and it's like when, if the dishwasher leaves and you get stuck washing the dishes, and the first one to go back there is usually the chef, because they're like, oh, this is like a night off. This feels good to get my hands dirty and in it.
yeah, yeah,
I love the pizza shift. I love being on the line. It's like I said, I've struggled with it a lot. I struggled when Wolf's Taylor, when I had two great chefs come along that we just happened to hit off. We all connected really well. And I was like hesitant, but I put someone else in front of the oven, and I was like, oh, I'm going to be on the other side of this. I'll be more focused on expo and execution, and sort of like writing a great play, or a great work of art where you're like trying to design something.
yeah.
But every sense of me wanting to be there was a struggle for me. It still is. And I'm back at it right now. So I am the chef, a head chef, and not just executive at Wolf's now.
Right.
I just opened, you caught me in the middle. I just opened 4 locations in 4 weeks with 4 different service styles, with 4 new teams, week to week to week, learning what worked at the first place and applied it to the second place, and then applied that knowledge to the third place, with this amazing group of leaders around me that are working with me right beside me to kind of make this happen. So we're right in the middle of that. And I landed back at Wolf's because this last year, Wolf's Taylor received Best New Restaurant Award from Bon Appetit magazine in the country. Huge honor for us. But, as soon as this thing hit us, Basta just went like this, and this one just went like down. And it was incredible to watch, because Wolf's was one of the most, the busiest, or maybe the most relevant in the moment restaurant in Denver, kind of thing, because we had just received this national award. But people gravitated quickly towards what was just so comfortable and basic. And so I wanted to come down here and be in front of stoves right now. And I haven't put a pizza on yet, though. I'm very tempted. I have a very small hearth oven, but I think about those Italy ovens that hold one pizza. And I'm like, I wonder if I could do that. I'd be afraid, like, if it got popular, I would, but I love the idea of thinking about it, even a pizza here at the Wolf's Taylor, like what that would look like. But I'm back here now full time, and you know, I'm excited to be on the line right now after, you know, the grind of
Yeah.
all the sort of go this way, go this way, go this way. What's your pivot, left to right? I mean, it's just been wild for everybody out there in this country right now.
But it's great to
Um,
hear that you're still excited about it. That's so important. And you're
yeah.
kind of hitting your stride. I feel like, 10 years ago when we first, caught up with you, you were a guy on the rise, and now we feel like the pieces are all coming together, and we're just so grateful that you've even been able to carve out some time for us today to share all this. We'd love to have you back on Pizza Talk as we continue this series. And so what I'd love to do is continue this conversation on another round. We'll get you back, and we'll catch up after the James Beard Awards, find out how things are going. And also, as this COVID crisis begins to clarify and lift, I'm sure that there's going to be a lot of evolution in the projects that you're doing as well. So this is a never-ending story, a never-ending quest, and we're just, really appreciative that you've been such a big part of our quest and shared yours with us. So for those who are watching, we're on Pizza Talk, presented by Pizza Quest. We've been with Chef Kelly Whitaker, who's not just a chef now. He's a farmer. He's a miller. He's a restaurateur. He's hitting his stride. Kelly, thanks so much for being with us, and we'll see you next time.
It's a pleasure, Peter. Thank you guys so much. Be well.
Thank you. You too.